showing us the actual political chamber of delegates and representatives and political backdeals and infightings and outfightings, calls for removal, vote of no approval, so to speak, war and politics, committees to validate the validity of these accusations. A lot of politics in the Phantom Menace. Very clearly shown. Was any of it boring? Was any of it clunky? Absolutely not. Against all of your point of view, I think George did a great job at this. I think his work here is absolutely impeccable. Is it for this telling of the story? May I rephrase that? Not impeccable. Perfectly chosen for this movie, I should say. He did not make these choices haphazardly. This is directed by George Lucas. This is written by George Lucas. This is executive produced by George Lucas. This is what George wanted. I love it. I loved it when I saw it in theaters. I loved it when I watched it. When I watched VHS, videotape, I loved it. When I watch it on DVD, I love it. When I stream it on the streaming service, I love it. I love it when I listen to it. I love it. I love the Phantom Menace. I love everything about the Phantom Menace. I think George Lucas did a great job. 10 out of 10. I congratulate George. I congratulate Lucasfilm. I congratulate every person that was involved in making this movie. Not only a job well done, but on a story well told. And I mean that deeply from the bottom of my heart. This was a fantastic story of epic proportions that was told in a way that it is accessible by a 10-year-old, in my opinion. Not that it should be accessible by a 10-year-old, but that it could be accessible by a 10-year-old. And also an 8-year-old or a 6-year-old if you wanted to really get down to it. And also it's a beautiful movie to watch and easy to follow if you turn the sound down and you just look at the pictures. Beautiful and beautiful to watch, as well as beautifully told and masterfully directed for the telling of this story. I will add here, for the telling of this story, as directed by George Lucas. George Lucas is the director. George Lucas is the writer. This is all George. Attack of the Clones, I'll grant some alterations possibly made to some of the characters, possibly bringing in Jar Jar Binks a little bit, maybe, due to fan backlash. I'll grant you that. Might have been some changes there. But Attack of the Clones is written and directed by George Lucas. In my opinion, George tells us a story unlike any other Star Wars movie we've ever seen. And now we have this element where we have clones introduced. And this is more of a sci-fi theme than we've seen in any Star Wars movie. As usually in most of the Star Wars movies, it's pretty much a grounded reality, but there's not a whole lot of sci-fi to it. As you understand the difference between sci-fi and this kind of a space fantasy type of world here. But suddenly now we see this world where they're using technology to clone people, and they're cloning, they're taking a way to create these clones of people. And one of these clones that we know of, the people and possibly other creatures and races, what they've done is they've created this army of clones out of this battlehead named Jango Fett, who then has a clone of himself that he raises as his son, who then later becomes Boba Fett, as we meet in the original trilogy, in Return of the Jedi. But this cloning technology, and then of course Obi-Wan goes to this planet after having found the location of it, and of course he meets his friend, longtime buddy, we assume, Dex at the diner. And let's talk about Dex for a second, the direction on this guy. and very much a CGI character. And the whole diner is a practical set. The outside of the diner is a full scale. It's a smaller scale, of course, but it's a full practical miniature set. This whole city there on Coruscant, where they're going to eat at the diner, the establishing shot at X's diner there, Dexter Jester. And then he goes inside there, and all of that's practical set. And along comes his buddy, and he tells him, well, what you got here is one of these Camino darts here. And those Caminos are cloners. Right, this guy's a real weirdo. Another reason I know George Lucas put a lot of time and care into this is because he wanted to make these characters look like certain characters from certain time periods, ideas that he grew up with, and movies that he loved growing up with as a kid. And one of this is the ode to the 50s diner. And so, yeah, you might not have liked it. Kind of really geeky. And also, it just shows that George Lucas is a really sentimental guy. He loves making movies. He loves creating art. He painted this picture with passion. And if you didn't like it, fine. And if you did love it, great. But to say that he's a bad director simply because you didn't like the choices he made, come on. All this stuff, man, he did on purpose. He did it with care, meticulously. Nothing's done by accident. There's no way you can argue George Lucas has made these movies and they're bad movies. He made these movies with bad faith. They're bad movies. It was a money scam. Come on. George Lucas, written and directed by, executive produced by. Come on, man. George Lucas, by any standard, is a good director. By the standard of the prequels, I dare say, a great director. This is some of the greatest cinema we've ever had, and some of the greatest cinema I dare say we will ever have. We were lucky, those of us, to be able to see these movies in theaters. Episodes 1, 2, and 3. Attack the Clones, an all-time epic masterpiece. We see Anakin Skywalker as a teenager as he begins to fuel his passion for and express his love for Padme Amidala, and who is now at this time a senator, was the queen in episode 1. And as he yearns for her, both physical passion and a soulful romance. And we see this, and George masterfully portrays this on the screen. And Hayden Christensen plays Anakin Skywalker down to a T, masterfully, perfectly. Is he torn against his desire for Padme? Both is just, hey, let's keep it real here, man. George has written a teenager here, just literally on fire in every way you can imagine. And I'll leave it at that. This movie's rated at least PG for a reason. Come on. But the things that George decided to put in the movie and the directorial choices that he made, brilliant, perfect for the telling of the story. All the CGI that he used, it was there. He used it. It was to be done to tell the story. He wanted it to look a certain way. He wanted the story to be told at a certain scale. I think it's beautiful. I think it's fantastic. And if you didn't like it, great. But to say that the prequels are bad movies, or George Lucas is a bad director because you didn't like the choices he made to tell his movies the way he told them, which he told perfectly and beautifully perfectly, I might add. Of course, they're not perfect movies. That's not what I mean to say. I mean to say he told them perfectly. He wanted them this way, in other words. They are what he wanted perfectly. I'm sure he might say he wanted some more changes. But you get the idea. Nothing's perfect, but I'll leave it at that. Yeah, there was a lot of CGI in Attack of the Clones, sure. But some of the most advancement of the characters and storytelling takes place too. And you get to have the CGI. And of course, a lot of it looks weird by today's standards. It looks like CGI. But to say he's a bad director and the prequels are bad movies, come on. It's a movie to tell a story, and if you didn't like it, great. But to say that effort wasn't put into it, or the quality's bad, That's just not what it is. Attack of the Clones is an epic masterpiece and made in a part of a story that is one of the epic masterpiece stories of our time in any generation. Written and directed by one of the greatest creators ever. So if you didn't like it, great. But to say it's bad, come on. Okay, moving on to Revenge of the Sith. We're just glossing over this stuff because we don't have all day. Here we see Anakin Skywalker as a fully developed military hero and a pilot in the galaxy, spanning the galaxy here. This war that's now going on is a civil war, as the Republic is being torn into. And then here we're introduced more deeply to the world of the dark side of the Force, even though, of course, as we've already indicated and noted, the Attack of the Clones, Anakin, we see his turn in one of the most horrific ways. As his mother dies there, and he goes to save his mother, to find his mother, only to find her die. She dies in his arms, and he slaughters all of the Sand People, including the women and the children. And George makes a very clear choice to show us children playing more than once, and what we assume to be women and men playing and watching children and having somewhat of a domestic setting. Very purposely he showed us this, and then to show that now Anakin was a murderer, even as in Attack of the Clones. So by the time we get to Revenge of the Sith, we know that he's a military hero, but we also know that he's committed murder at least once. But he did confess this murder to Padme Amidala, and she knows this too. And as George is telling us this story and these episodes within this story, and these stories within this story, if you will, he's making these choices. And in this particular movie, Revenge of the Sith, we open up and we see that Anakin has a scar. I'm not looking at it, but his scar is now a sign of his having participated in these wars. So we know that in addition to having gone into the dark side and committing murder, he has now, as part of his psyche, whatever horrors or trauma, if you will put it that way, though the participation in the actions of this war is left upon his mind. And this is something that George does tell in a very family-friendly way, if you will, without dismissing it outright. A lot of stuff it's not a lot of gore, so to speak, but George makes it real that this is a war that is going on, that is resulting in real life being lost and real tragedy in terms of stakes for life and liberty, and the fall of the Republic. But the real story he's telling is the futility of war, should I say. I don't want to get too much into that because again, you can read all about it in the books. These are some deeper dives here that we're taking, the themes that George is following in regards to his philosophy and how he tries to put certain ideas into his stories that don't seem to be force-fed to the audience, but yet they're always in his stories about bringing peace to the world. But this getting sidetracked there, you can read all about that in the books and all about the deeper meanings of Star Wars episodes 1, 2, and 3. But we see the politics of this world, and we see how this leads to war, and we see the futility of it all, because it's only to sustain power and sustain those in power. And George shows us this, both in imagery and in music, and then as well in writing. And here we see Order 66. Whereupon this order, why the number 6 and 6, I do not know. But nonetheless, the order is executed such a way as to really pull on my heartstrings. I mean, I really felt it, man. And I remember when I watched this movie in the theaters, I did just like Yoda did when he just dropped his cane and put his hand on his chest. I just couldn't believe it. And just talking about it now, I'm doing that right now. Order 66 is one of the most memorable, to put it mildly, scenes in movie history and cinema history. I'll leave it at that. So, in the end, we see Anakin go fully into the dark side as he, in order to save Padme, betrays his very oath to the Jedi Order and becomes an enemy of the Jedi, even murdering younglings, which we've already seen him do. We saw him do it in episode 2, beautifully told by George. A horrible story, beautifully told. And now here we see him doing it. He's fully turned to the dark side. And then it's a duel to the death on Mustafar between Anakin Skywalker, the student, and Obi-Wan Kenobi, the teacher. And George Lucas tells us this story, and it's beautiful. And I'll tell you, it's the special effects, the set, and you just watch that scene there. It's about a minute long. I saw a video on it. It was a documentary. I think it was called How Much Work Goes Into Making 1 Minute of Star Wars. That's a fantastic scene. But I do think that, of course, Duel of the Fates is unmatched as one of the all-time, no, never mind one of the all-time, it's the all-time best lightsaber battle in the Star Wars movies, period, over and out. Duel of the Fates, unmatched. But Anakin fully turns to the dark side in Revenge of the Sith, and then, of course, tragically ends up contributing to, you might say, killing Padme, his wife, as he force chokes her, and then later, she dies while giving birth to her 2 children, twins, and she names them Luke and Leia. And all of this was seen in dreams, and this was told by the storyteller, by George. It was told to us. And as we looked at these images and saw these images, we were seeing what Anakin was seeing. And now here we're seeing it come to pass. And this is how George is telling us the story. Through dreams that Anakin is having, and the secret meetings that he and Padme are having in public because they can't be seen because they're not supposed to be married. It's a lot of pressure on this character, Anakin, and he's making it worse for himself by refusing help from his friends. Is it somewhat clunky? Yes. Is it pretty deep in the expositional dialogue? Quite a bit. But is it ever boring? No. It is the feeling of it, the sense that there's an urgency here, a movement, and that you care about the characters. I'm absolutely 100% all in, all invested. I'm reading this, I'm seeing it. The opera scene with Anakin and the Chancellor. It just, Order 66, Anakin going full to the dark side. Even the last final greeting between Obi-Wan and Anakin, as they both say to each other, "May the Force be with you." And this would be the last time they would meet as friends. And then, of course, we see them in episode 4. But we are seeing them for the first time, as I did in episode 4, as Vader introduces himself to me as the teacher is now the master, the student has now become the teacher, and so on and so forth. But now I see where that character is actually the student, and he is now battling to the death his teacher. And in this battle, he loses. And we see how Anakin Skywalker is turned into Darth Vader, and how he becomes Darth Vader. And we learn this whole story of Anakin Skywalker, the pilot, the great pilot, and the warrior, an ally, and a friend. We see this, but now we also see the love and the tragedy. And we know now what Anakin went through as he's laying there, looking up at his son, Luke, in Return of the Jedi. And he tells him, take off this mask. I want to look at you with my own eyes. And then Luke tells him, no, if I do, you'll die. And Darth Vader, Anakin, at this point says, that nothing can stop that now. I want to look at you with my own eyes. So he takes the mask off, the hood off, and he says, to tell Luke, he tells Luke, he says, tell your sister you were right. Tell her, sister, tell her you were right. And then he dies. It's one of the most beautiful scenes in movie history, not to mention literature history. As the screenplays, literature. It's an all-time epic story, and of course I didn't quote it exactly, but you get the idea. But the reason that has so much resonance is because we see episodes 1 through 3, and we meet Anakin as he's a little boy at age 10. And so we see him grow up as a teenager, we see him fall in love, and we see him murder kids. And then we also see him nearly murder his own wife, and then be turned into a cyborg monster. It's a real tragedy. It's a terrible, terrible tragedy, told beautifully, and I would say nearly perfectly, by George Lucas. The best that could be accomplished in our time with the technology that we have available, within the budgets that we have. To be realistic, of course, there's always a way to do it perfectly according to your point of view, according to your position. It didn't have to be all CGI and attack the clones for the battle on Geonosis. Well, of course it did, according to the scale that George wanted. I mean, a lot of people would have gladly made their own suits, went out there and volunteered to do it just to shoot a scene in a Star Wars movie. That's not what George wanted. George wanted the scene to look a certain way. He wanted to tell the story a certain way. He wanted a certain time restraint. He had a certain budget. He chose to go with CGI. Fine, get over it. It doesn't mean it's a bad movie. By any objective, it's a good movie. Now, I did use that term on purpose. So by an objective point of view, it's a good movie. By a subjective point of view, maybe not. But objectively, come on, there's no way you can say that Star Wars Episode 1, Star Wars Episode 2, or Star Wars Episode 3 is a bad movie. No way, by any objective. They're great movies, by any objective. Rather, great movies, I would say, they're made nearly perfectly by the director. Each of them is that movie. And that is, in the whole trilogy, I would say it's great. And I would say each one of those movies is a great movie. And I would say the prequels is better than the original trilogy. And the prequels make the original trilogy better. And that's what I have to say about, is George Lucas a good director based on the prequels? The answer is yes. George is a great director based on the prequels. And are the prequels good? Yes, they're great. And what do I think about the prequels? The prequels are fantastic. 10 out of 10, baby. All-time epic masterpiece. Written and directed by George Lucas. Produced by George Lucas. Rather, produced by Rick McCallum. Executive produced by George Lucas. The Phantom Menace. Attack of the Clones. Revenge of the Sith. Epic masterpiece trilogy. And that's all the time we have for today, dear friends. Until we meet again, remember, your focus determines your reality. May the Force be with us.